Hey friend, please subscribe. 1 second for you. Big deal for me. I had never considered myself a jealous man. I didn't even think I could be jealous. Sure, there were a few moments where I'd get a pang in my stomach when I saw another guy laughing too close to my wife. But that was always fleeting, nothing more than an instinctual reaction. I trusted Sophie completely. We were married for over 4 years, and I never once doubted her loyalty. Until that night. It wasn't even about the way she looked at him. It wasn't the words they exchanged, or the way her fingers brushed his arm during their brief conversation. No, it was something far subtler, something I couldn't quite put my finger on at first, but it was undeniable once I saw it. That night started like any other. We had been going through the motions for the past few months. Work, errands, the occasional date night. The spark was there, but it felt a little faded, like a book that had been read too many times. But you know how it is. You try to reignite things, put in the effort, even when you don't fully realize how much you've drifted apart until it's too late. Sophie and I had agreed to go to a bar for a drink after work. It wasn't planned. It wasn't special. Just a little night out, nothing extravagant. The bar was one of those dimly lit, low-key places that played soft music in the background and smelled faintly of wood and whiskey. There was a comfortable air about it, nothing like the noisy, crowded bars I'd been to in my younger years. It was just right for a couple like us, in our 30s, looking for a moment of escape after a long week. We didn't sit too far from the bar, our table tucked in the corner where we could see the entrance and the people milling about. Sophie looked amazing, of course. She always did. I noticed the way her eyes sparkled when she laughed, the subtle way her hand moved to her hair as she leaned in to speak to me. But there was something off about her that night. I couldn't quite pinpoint it, but she seemed distant, as if her mind was somewhere else. I brushed it off at first. It's just the weight of the week, I thought. Maybe she's tired. Maybe something's bothering her. We had drinks, shared a few stories, laughed about silly things. But still, there was that lingering sense that something wasn't quite right. The man arrived shortly after we sat down. I didn't know him, and he didn't know us. But he stood out immediately. He had this confidence about him, a kind of ease that felt almost predatory. His movements were fluid, deliberate. He wasn't just looking for a drink. He was looking for attention, and it didn't take long for him to find it. I could see him glance over at us a few times, but I didn't think anything of it. People do that, right? They look at you in passing, maybe wondering what kind of relationship you have. But then, when he walked up to the bar and leaned against it, he did something strange. He didn't just look around or check his phone. He turned his head slightly, just enough so that he could see us. And when his gaze lingered on Sophie, there was no mistaking it. It wasn't curiosity. It wasn't even admiration. It was interest. Genuine, unguarded interest. I noticed Sophie looking back at him, too, but her gaze didn't flicker away quickly as it should have. It stayed. For longer than it should have. I wanted to dismiss it. I wanted to believe that maybe I was overreacting, that I was just imagining things. But then, Sophie did something that I couldn't ignore. She smiled. It wasn't the smile she gave me, the one that always made me feel like I was the center of her world. No, this smile was different. This smile was reserved, more coy than I'd ever seen from her. She laughed, genuinely laughed, at something he said, and it was almost as if she had forgotten I was sitting right there. For the first time that night, I felt it. That sharp, cold sensation crawling up my spine. It wasn't just that she was talking to him. It was the way she was talking to him. It was the way she leaned in a little too far, the way she allowed herself to be caught in the moment with him, as if nothing else in the world mattered. I sat back, the knot in my stomach tightening. 100 thoughts began to race through my mind. Was I overreacting? Was I just being paranoid? Could she really be flirting with him? My hands grew cold, my chest tight. I told myself it was nothing, nothing at all. But as I watched them, I realized I couldn't look away. Something inside me told me to keep watching. It was then that I noticed it, the way he was standing just a little too close, his body angled toward hers, his arm brushing against her side as he spoke. Sophie didn't pull away. She didn't seem uncomfortable at all. If anything, she seemed engaged, almost as if she was enjoying this. I looked down at my drink, trying to calm myself, trying to talk myself out of the growing unease. Maybe I was just reading too much into this. Maybe Sophie was just being polite, just having a friendly conversation. But deep down, I knew better. I could tell the difference between politeness and something else. And right now, I was seeing the something else. Then, something inside me snapped. I didn't think about it. I didn't plan it. But I felt this overwhelming need to act. To do something. Anything. To make her realize what was happening. Without saying a word, I reached into my pocket and pulled out my wedding ring. It felt heavy in my hand, cold to the touch, a symbol of everything I thought we had. I looked at it for a moment, as if it might give me the strength to do what I knew I had to do. And then, I walked over. I didn't approach her directly. I didn't want to make a scene. But I placed the ring next to her drink on the table, where she would see it. Where he would see it. It wasn't a grand gesture. It wasn't some dramatic confrontation. It was just a small, subtle move. But it was enough. Because when Sophie looked at the ring, when her eyes finally landed on the cold metal next to her drink, I saw it. I saw the moment she realized everything had changed. I could see it in her eyes the moment she saw the ring. It wasn't the shock I expected. It wasn't the guilt or the embarrassment that I had imagined. No, her expression was something else entirely. It was like she had been caught off guard by something she didn't even realize was happening. It was a mix of surprise, confusion, and, maybe, something darker. She glanced from the ring to me, and for a moment, I thought she might say something. But she didn't. She just stared at it, her lips parted slightly, as if she was trying to process what was happening. I stood there, my heart pounding in my chest, unable to move. I had expected this moment to be more dramatic, to somehow break the tension. But now, standing there in the silence, I realized something. This wasn't about confrontation. It wasn't about proving anything to her or to the guy at the bar. It was about me making a decision. A decision to stop pretending that everything was fine, that we were fine. Sophie slowly turned her head to the man at the bar, and in that split second, I saw the truth. She didn't even need to say anything. It was all in the way she looked at him. That smile, the one she had given him earlier, was still lingering on her face, but it wasn't just a friendly gesture anymore. There was something more to it, something that made my blood run cold. I could feel the heat rising in my cheeks, the anger starting to build, but I couldn't bring myself to speak. I was frozen, caught in a moment I never thought I would be in. Sophie opened her mouth, but before she could say anything, the man stood up from his spot at the bar and made his way toward us. I wanted to say something, to make it clear that I wasn't just going to sit there and let this happen. But I stayed silent. I was waiting to see how she would handle this. As he approached, Sophie finally broke the silence, her voice soft but steady. "Adam, this is Jack," she said, as if introducing me to an old friend. I didn't offer my hand. Instead, I gave Jack a nod, trying my best to stay composed. But inside, I was seething. I wanted to scream. I wanted to call him out for being a predator, for taking advantage of a moment when my wife was vulnerable. But I couldn't do it. Not yet. I needed to know the truth, and I wasn't about to let my emotions get the best of me. Jack smiled at me, a knowing smile, like he knew exactly what was happening. Maybe he did. He wasn't stupid. He had seen the tension in the air, the way Sophie had been leaning in just a little too much toward him. Sophie, on the other hand, was acting like nothing was wrong. She had returned to her relaxed state, as if we were all just friends, casually hanging out. But I could feel it in my bones that things were different now. The weight of what was happening settled in my chest like a stone, suffocating me with every breath. Sophie and Jack exchanged a few more words, small talk, meaningless chatter that didn't really matter in the grand scheme of things. But I was no longer listening to them. My mind was racing, and I could feel my thoughts spiraling out of control. Was this happening? Was she really flirting with him right in front of me? I glanced down at the ring again, still sitting next to her drink. The symbol of everything we had built together. The symbol of our commitment. And yet, here we were. This man, this stranger, standing between us, filling the empty space that had once been ours. It wasn't just about trust anymore. It was about respect. And right now, I felt completely disrespected. Sophie finally turned back to me, her smile fading just slightly as she met my gaze. She must have sensed the shift in the air, the change in my demeanor. But she didn't apologize. She didn't even acknowledge the ring on the table. Instead, she reached for her drink, her fingers brushing against the cold glass as she lifted it to her lips. And then, for the first time in what felt like hours, she spoke. "Do you want to join us?" She asked, her tone casual, as if this was just another typical night out. As if I hadn't just placed a ring next to her drink to remind her of the life we were supposed to be building together. The question hit me like a punch to the gut. Of course, she had no idea what I was really thinking. She probably thought it was all harmless, just a few moments of playful banter. But to me, it was something more. It was the beginning of the end, and I wasn't sure I was ready to face it. Her question hung in the air like a cold breeze, cutting through the tension that had settled between us. I stared at Sophie for a moment, trying to process her words. "Do you want to join us?" she asked, as if everything was perfectly normal. As if I wasn't standing there, watching my wife share a moment with another man. One that was much more than friendly. I didn't answer right away. I couldn't. Instead, I just looked at her, really looked at her. The woman I had married, the woman I had trusted with my heart. How had we arrived here? Sophie's smile faltered for just a split second, but then she recovered. She took a sip of her drink, her eyes avoiding mine as she glanced at Jack. The way she moved, the way she shifted her attention between him and me, made my stomach twist. It wasn't the playful banter I'd seen in her with other people. This was something else, something I didn't recognize. Jack, sensing my hesitation, leaned against the table and grinned. "It's okay, man. We were just chatting about work. You're welcome to join us." His voice was smooth, confident, and almost rehearsed. He wasn't even trying to hide the fact that he was enjoying this. I swallowed hard, my throat dry, and glanced at Sophie again. Her face was still calm, but there was an unreadable look in her eyes. Was this intentional? Was she trying to hurt me? Or had I simply missed something all along? I knew I should speak, say something that would either expose the truth or at least make her acknowledge what was happening. But instead, I found myself sitting down, pulling a chair out across from them. I wasn't ready to confront her yet, not until I had all the pieces. I needed to understand why this was happening. "So, what's the plan for tonight?" I asked, forcing a smile that felt fake, even to my own ears. I could feel the weight of my words, the awkwardness in the air, but I pushed through. "Just another casual night out." Sophie's eyes flickered to me, her smile a little too tight. "Yeah, nothing special. Just enjoying the evening." She didn't offer more, not that I was expecting her to. She wasn't going to admit anything. Not yet. Jack leaned in slightly, as if trying to draw me into the conversation, but I couldn't focus on what he was saying. My mind was elsewhere, still replaying the way Sophie had looked at him, the way her body had angled toward his, the way she had responded to him, and to me, with such distance. I wanted to ask her, confront her right there, but something inside me held me back. Maybe it was pride. Maybe I was hoping this was all just a misunderstanding. But deep down, I knew it wasn't. There was a silence that stretched between us, the kind that only comes when words fail. Jack didn't seem to mind it, casually sipping his drink as he looked at Sophie. But I couldn't shake the feeling that I was the outsider in my own marriage. She was no longer the woman I had married. Not in that moment. And then, just as I was about to speak, I saw it. A subtle glance from Sophie to Jack. It was brief, but it was there. Something passed between them that I couldn't ignore. It wasn't just a casual look. It was a silent acknowledgement of something more. Something that made my chest tighten. The moment she looked at him, everything changed. It wasn't the casual glance she had given him earlier in the night. This one was different. It was deliberate, almost intimate. It was the kind of look that says, "I see you. I know you see me." It was a silent agreement between them, and it was enough to make my stomach churn. I felt a sudden wave of anger, but I kept it buried deep. I didn't want to let her see how much this was affecting me. Instead, I took a deep breath and forced my eyes back to the drink in front of me. I swirled the glass absently, trying to push the anger away, trying to calm my racing thoughts. But it was hard to ignore the fact that, at that moment, Sophie was no longer the woman I thought I knew. Jack leaned back, his casual confidence still apparent. He was so relaxed, so comfortable in his seat, as if he owned the place. It made me sick to my stomach. But what bothered me more was the way Sophie responded to him. She wasn't pulling away, wasn't setting boundaries. She was leaning in. Her body was angled toward him, her leg just barely brushing against his under the table. I watched her as she laughed at something Jack said, too easily, too quickly. And that laugh? It wasn't the laugh I loved. It wasn't the one that made me smile, the one that filled me with warmth. This one felt hollow. "I didn't realize you two were such good friends," I said, trying to sound nonchalant. But the words tasted bitter coming out. It wasn't a question. It was a challenge. Sophie looked at me, her expression faltering for the briefest moment. "Oh, we're not really close friends. Just work acquaintances," she replied, her voice soft. But there was an edge to it, something that didn't sit right with me. She wasn't being honest. Not fully, anyway. Jack raised an eyebrow, his smile never wavering. Actually, we've gotten to know each other a bit more since she started working with us on that project, he said. His voice had a casual tone, but I could tell he was watching me closely, like a predator sizing up his prey. I nodded, my jaw clenched, trying to hold onto my composure. It was clear now, this wasn't just small talk. There was something between them, something that went beyond the professional. And it wasn't just the way they were interacting. It was the underlying energy between them, something that felt almost electric. I couldn't take it anymore. The way they were looking at each other, the way they kept exchanging those little, intimate glances, was suffocating me. I wanted to confront her right there, ask her what was really going on. But I didn't. Not yet. I wasn't ready to hear what I might learn. Instead, I excused myself, standing up abruptly. I'm going to grab another drink, I muttered, walking toward the bar. I needed a moment. A moment to breathe, to think, to try and figure out what the hell was happening. As I reached the bar, I ordered a whiskey, and I tried to focus on the burn as it slid down my throat. The sound of laughter from the table behind me filled the space, but it was different now. It wasn't the sound of joy, it was the sound of something else, something that made my heart pound in my chest. I stared into my glass, trying to get control of my thoughts. Was I overreacting? Was I just being paranoid? Maybe this was all in my head. But deep down, I knew it wasn't. I had seen enough. I had felt enough. And something told me that I wasn't going to like what I uncovered next. But I had to know. I had to know if this was really happening. If my wife, my Sophie, was really slipping away from me, right in front of my eyes. I sat at the bar, swirling the whiskey in my glass, letting the heat from the alcohol numb some of the tension that was building inside me. The noise from the bar felt distant, like it was happening in another world. My mind, however, was racing. I couldn't stop thinking about what I had just witnessed. Sophie and Jack, the way they looked at each other, the way she had been so comfortable with him, so open. I didn't know how much time passed before I felt a tap on my shoulder. I turned around to see Sophie standing there, her face soft but guarded. She had come to find me, and I could see that she was trying to act calm, trying to pretend like everything was fine. But I could see through it. Her eyes were a little too wide, a little too focused. "Are you okay?" she asked, her voice a little quieter than usual. It was a simple question, but it felt loaded. She didn't ask it with concern. She asked it like she was trying to gauge how much I had noticed, how much I had seen. I forced a smile. Yeah, just needed a moment. I took another sip of my drink, trying to steady my shaking hand. I'm fine. But I wasn't fine. And she knew it. There was something in her expression, a flicker of unease that she couldn't hide. I was suddenly aware of the space between us, how distant it had become in such a short amount of time. This wasn't the woman I had married. Not in this moment. Sophie took a deep breath, then sat down beside me. Her perfume, the one I used to love, filled my nostrils, but it didn't feel comforting anymore. It felt foreign, like I was sitting next to a stranger. "Look, Adam," she started, her voice hesitant. "I know things have felt off lately, but you've been so distant too," and I cut her off. "Distant? Is that what you think this is about?" The word slipped out sharper than I intended. "Sophie, I'm not the one flirting with someone else at a bar." Her face went pale, and for a moment, I thought she might say something, defend herself, deny it. But she didn't. She just stared at me, her lips pressed together in a tight line. It was as if she couldn't bring herself to admit what had been happening. I couldn't let it go. The tension in my chest was unbearable. "What's going on, Sophie? Why were you so comfortable with him? With Jack?" She exhaled slowly, looking down at her hands, like she was searching for the right words. "It's not like that," she said quietly. "I didn't mean for things to get complicated." "Complicated," I repeated, my voice rising despite myself. "Sophie, you were smiling at him like you've known him your whole life. You were practically sitting in his lap. How is that not complicated?" She flinched at the words, but didn't meet my eyes. Her silence spoke louder than anything she could have said. There was nothing else to do now but face the truth. She wasn't going to deny it. She wasn't going to apologize. She was caught, and we both knew it. I felt sick. My mind kept flashing back to the way they had looked at each other, like I didn't even exist in that moment. It wasn't just an innocent flirtation. There was something more there, something that felt like betrayal, like she had been slipping away from me for a while, and I had just been too blind to see it. I'm sorry, Adam, Sophie said, her voice barely above a whisper. I didn't mean for this to happen. I didn't mean to hurt you. But it was too late for apologies. I set my glass down with a sharp click on the counter, the sound cutting through the tension between us. No, I said, my voice steadier now. I don't think you understand. It's not about the flirting. It's about everything else. It's about the fact that you've been so distant for so long, and I didn't even notice. It's about the fact that we've been drifting apart, and I didn't do anything to stop it. Sophie opened her mouth as if to respond, but the words caught in her throat. I could see the guilt in her eyes now, but it wasn't enough. It wasn't enough to fix what had already been broken. She reached out, her hand hovering over mine, but I pulled away. I couldn't touch her, not now. Not when the trust was shattered. I don't know what to say anymore, she whispered. I wish I could take it all back. But the truth was, I didn't want her to take it back. I didn't want to go back to pretending like everything was fine, because it wasn't, and I wasn't sure if it ever would be again. The air between us grew thick, a palpable weight that neither of us seemed willing to lift. Sophie's hand still hovered near mine, but the gap between us was no longer just physical. It was something deeper, something more unsettling than the space in a room. She seemed to be waiting for me to say something, but I didn't know what. What could I possibly say? What was there left to say when everything I thought was true, everything I believed in, had been flipped upside down? I don't know how we got here, Sophie said, her voice shaky, almost breaking. I never meant to hurt you. I really didn't. I wanted to believe her. I wanted to hear those words and somehow convince myself that this was just some misunderstanding, that maybe she was just confused, or maybe she was lonely. But I couldn't. I couldn't because the way she looked at Jack, the way she responded to him, had nothing to do with confusion. It was too deliberate, too intentional. I leaned back against the bar, running my hand over my face. I felt exhausted, mentally and physically drained from this conversation that felt like it was spiraling into nothingness. I know you didn't mean to hurt me, I said quietly, my voice flat. But you did. You already did. Sophie's eyes welled up, but she didn't cry. She just looked at me, a mixture of guilt and regret washing over her face. I never wanted this. I swear. I don't know. It's like I've been drifting for so long, and I didn't even realize it until I met him. The words stung, cutting deeper than any confrontation could have. It was the admission of something I had been too afraid to say aloud, that she had been pulling away from me long before Jack had come into the picture. It was the realization that we had both been living separate lives under the same roof, pretending everything was fine when it wasn't. I exhaled sharply, feeling a weight lift from my chest as I acknowledged the truth. So this isn't just about Jack, I said. It's about something else. Something that's been wrong for a while. Sophie nodded, her eyes downcast. Yeah, I think I've been checked out for longer than I should have been. The honesty in her words hit me like a ton of bricks. It wasn't about a random flirtation. It wasn't about some spontaneous attraction. This was something that had been brewing for months, maybe even longer. And I had been blind to it, so wrapped up in my own life that I didn't see her slipping away until it was too late. I looked at her then, really looked at her. The woman I had married, the woman I had trusted. She wasn't the same anymore. And maybe I wasn't either. Is there anything left to save? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Sophie swallowed hard, her lips trembling. She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she looked at me, as if searching for something. Maybe hope, maybe an answer she didn't have. But I didn't have one for her. The silence stretched on, thick and suffocating. I didn't know what to do next. I didn't know if I could go back to who we were before, or if I even wanted to. It felt like we were both standing at the edge of a cliff, and I didn't know if we were about to jump, or if we were just too scared to take the leap. The bar around us buzzed, but in that moment, it felt as if the world had quieted, leaving just the two of us in a heavy silence. Sophie's eyes stayed fixed on the floor, her fingers fidgeting with the edge of her drink. I wanted to say something, anything, but the words stuck in my throat. What was there left to say? The man I thought I knew, the woman I had married, was slipping away, and I couldn't stop it. And worse, I wasn't sure if I wanted to. You never told me, I finally said, my voice tight. You never told me you were unhappy. Sophie's eyes flickered up at me, then quickly darted away. I didn't know how, she whispered. I didn't know how to tell you when everything felt so wrong. There it was. The truth, hanging in the air between us, ugly and raw. She hadn't been happy. Not for a while. And I had been so caught up in my own routine, in my own world, that I never noticed. I should have noticed. How long has it been? I asked, the words leaving my mouth before I could stop them. I wasn't sure I wanted the answer, but the need to know overwhelmed me. Sophie hesitated, her fingers curling around her glass. A while, she said quietly. A few months, at least. I guess I just didn't know how to fix it. How to tell you that I wasn't the same anymore. My heart dropped, the weight of her admission pressing down on me. A few months. That was when everything had started to shift, when the cracks in our relationship began to form. And I hadn't seen a single one of them. You were never going to tell me, were you? I said, my voice laced with disbelief. You were just going to let it die? I never wanted it to die, Sophie whispered, her voice cracking. I didn't know what to do. I felt so lost. I didn't know how to respond. The anger I felt earlier, the jealousy, the betrayal, it was all still there, but it was slowly being replaced by something else. Something worse. A sense of resignation. The woman I loved, the woman I had committed my life to, was no longer the person I had thought she was. And what was worse, neither of us knew how to fix it. I stood up abruptly, needing space, needing to breathe. I didn't want to look at her anymore, didn't want to see the sadness in her eyes or hear the trembling in her voice. I need to go, I muttered, barely able to hear myself over the pounding in my chest. Sophie's hand shot out, grabbing my arm before I could walk away. Wait, she said urgently, her grip surprisingly strong. Please don't leave like this. I froze, not sure what to do. My mind screamed at me to walk away, to leave this all behind, to walk out of that bar and never look back. But something stopped me. Something in the way she held me, in the desperation in her voice. I don't want to lose you, Adam, she said, her voice breaking as she finally let go of my arm. But I don't know how to make this right. For a moment, I stood there, torn between the man who had once loved her and the man I had become in the wake of her betrayal. I had always believed in the idea of love, in the idea that you fight for what's yours. But this felt different. It felt like something too far gone to save. I don't know if I can forgive you, I said, my voice quieter now, the words painful to say. I don't know if I can forget what I saw tonight. Sophie's face crumpled, the weight of my words sinking in. I never wanted this, she whispered again, but the apology felt hollow now. Too little, too late. Without another word, I turned and walked out of the bar, the cold night air hitting me like a slap in the face. As I stepped into the street, I realized something. This was it. This was the end. I didn't know if we could come back from this, and I wasn't sure I wanted to try anymore. The night air was cold as I walked away from the bar, each step feeling heavier than the last. I could still feel the echo of Sophie's touch on my arm, her desperate plea for me to stay, to fix something that had already been broken beyond repair. But as I moved further from the bar, I felt something shift within me. A clarity I hadn't expected. I'd spent so long thinking that love meant putting up with everything, that loyalty meant standing by someone no matter what. But tonight, I realized something more important, self-respect. I couldn't keep sacrificing myself for someone who no longer valued me the way I deserved. The betrayal, no matter how subtle, had shattered everything. I had given her the benefit of the doubt, time and time again, but now I understood. I had to walk away, not just from her, but from the lies I had been living. I stood on the street corner, the lights of the city flickering in front of me, and I made a decision. I wasn't going to let her walk all over me. I wasn't going to be the man who stayed silent, the man who let his worth be determined by someone else's actions. I was going to find my own peace. And it started with taking control of my life. I walked back to our apartment, the thought of her words echoing in my head. I didn't know how to tell you. I shook my head. It wasn't that she didn't know how to tell me. It was that she didn't want to. She had chosen him. She had chosen someone else over our marriage, over the life we'd built together. When I got home, the silence was suffocating. Sophie's things were scattered around, reminders of a time when we were happy. But now, they were just remnants of a life that no longer fit. I could feel the anger welling up again, but this time it wasn't directed at her. It was directed at myself for allowing this to go on for so long. I grabbed my phone and dialed a number I hadn't thought I'd call for a while. "Yeah, it's Adam," I said when the voice on the other end picked up. "I need to make some changes. Fast." The next few days were a blur of decisions. I took control of my finances, made sure everything was set in motion. I filed the papers. She had betrayed me, but I wasn't going to let her take everything I had worked for. No more compromises. No more second chances. A few weeks later, I got the call. The divorce was final. The papers had been signed, and Sophie had moved out. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't messy. It was clean. I had done what I needed to do, not out of anger, but out of a sense of finally reclaiming my life. And then there was Sophie. She reached out to me a few times after the divorce, texting, calling, trying to apologize, trying to fix things. But I had moved on. I had no anger left to give her. I had already taken back control, and I wasn't going to let her manipulate me anymore. But it wasn't until months later that I got the call that would finally put everything into perspective. It was from a mutual friend. Sophie's dating Jack. The voice on the other end told me. It seems like she's really fallen for him. I felt a brief flash of something. Not anger. Not satisfaction. Just pity. She had walked away from something real, something solid, for someone who would never be there for her the way I had been. And now, the truth was clear. She had gotten exactly what she deserved. As for me, I found peace. I started traveling. I rediscovered hobbies I'd long abandoned. I met someone new, someone who actually appreciated me, who made me laugh, who was willing to build something meaningful. She was kind, patient, and, most importantly, she made me feel seen again. Life wasn't perfect, but it was mine. I wasn't going to live in the shadow of what Sophie had taken from me. I had built a better version of myself, one that didn't rely on the past or the mistakes of others. And in the end, that was all that mattered. Please like the video and share your thoughts in the comments. I read them all.